Protein! Protein has probably got to be the largest subject you'll ever hear about if you start going to the gym, especially as a male, because for some reason everyone's absolutely obsessed with it. Good news for supplement companies, protein's expensive and they help drive this massive obsession for everyone to carry on just having loads of protein. Yes, protein is essential for muscle growth. Yeah, you do need a slightly elevated amount if you're going to be training with weights, especially if you're bodybuilding. But you don't need as much as people tell you, but that is a completely separate subject and I will probably go on a lot of different rants about that. For you to understand those rants, you probably need to understand what protein is, because most people think they know what protein is and the fact that it comes from animals and it's made of amino acids, but there are different stages to protein, there are different kinds of protein, and they are far more important in your body and just general roles than people think. It's not just about muscle. The whole purpose of our DNA is to make proteins. That is its essential point. If you look at the post-protein synthesis, can't even speak. It's linked at the bottom. It's just saying about how our DNA actually works and how each little section of DNA is used to code for a different protein. Again, I'm going on a tangent again. So, protein. They're made of amino acids, which are little blocks that make up links in a chain. Those links join by peptide bonds. And you can have two joining to make a dipeptide, or you can have loads to make a polypeptide, and that's the ones we know about because that's the one that makes muscle. Proteins are also essential in carrying the oxygen in our blood, so if you're not interested in weights and building muscle, then it's handy to know how the oxygen's carried to people who do running or are alive. So, distant ramble aside, let's just get on with the actual video. Okay, so this is going to be a very nice, quick, simple video. It could be more complex, but I've decided that if people want it to be more complex, there is a link to the corresponding blog post in the description below. So if you would like to learn about primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary proteins, again, that sounds confusing. It's not actually confusing, but I thought most people don't need to know it, so I won't put it in. This is going to be very, very basic. We're going to be looking at the structure of proteins, because that means that you'll understand how they can function, how they're used, metabolized, used to build muscle, everything later on. Because I will go into a lot of detail about that in different rants, because protein is so massive in the fitness and gymming world, it's worth understanding it. So, I just started another rant, let's get on with it. Proteins are made from amino acids. And again, amino acids are extremely simple, because they all have the exact same backbone, and have the same three characteristic groups in that backbone. So you have this group here. This is our amino group, just being the NH2. Brilliant, so we know that. This is our carboxyl group over here. Now, that sounds quite biochemistry-y, but it's worth knowing a carboxyl group and an amino group, to be honest, because carboxyl groups especially come up quite a lot in organic chemistry. I'm not saying that my site is all organic chemistry, but there is going to be some aspects thrown in because this is actual knowledge, not fads and pish. So we have our carboxyl group here and our amino group here. Our last and third group is the R group. By the way, that H up there, that's always there. So this is our R group. Now, an R group is the only point where there is any difference between amino acids. Now, R is not an atom, it's not a molecule, it means it is anything. So there can be any structure in there, that's just where it'll go. So if we take two examples, I'm just going to write it as NH2 there, and COOH. This is glycine, because it's just got a H there. But what you can have instead is if you had a CH2, CH2, and then we had another carboxyl group here. That then makes it glutamic acid, which is another amino acid. Now, that's the only difference between amino acids. There are 20 of them in total, meaning 20 different groups changing here. 12 of them we can actually synthesize ourselves. So if we provide our body with the correct nutrients and fuel, the liver is actually able to make 12 of these amino acids to be used to make up the proteins. There are 8 amino acids that we can't synthesize ourselves. I think it's 9 in children, which means we have to get them in our diet, and they are the essential amino acids, and you may have heard of that term before. Often you can have problems with vegans and things like that, not quite getting enough of these essential amino acids without supplementation, because you can't synthesize them yourself, especially out of other things, so they do need to be eaten. There is another term I'm going to quickly highlight, and that is that of a complete protein. So I heard this one a lot. When I was always in the gym non-stop, I used to always hear people saying you're getting your essential amino acids and your complete proteins. But when I used to ask people what's a complete protein, I think literally about 4 people managed to answer that question. A complete protein is literally just a protein that contains all 20 amino acids. It means that it's a protein source that when you ingest it, you'll get all the essential and non-essential amino acids you could possibly imagine. Quite difficult to get in plant-based foods again, so you need to be quite clever if you're a vegan or vegetarian to be able to go out and know what the amino acid content is to be able to meet all of them. I'm not saying it's massively difficult if you know what you're doing, but it's a little bit more effort. Whereas for meat eaters and omnivores, milk is a great one. That's a complete protein. Chicken has got a lot of complete protein. It's easy to get your sources. Okay, so we have our amino acids. I'm not going to draw it out fully. Actually, yeah, you know what, I am. I'm not going to be lazy. Let's start with our amino acid here. I'm just going to write it as a general one with an R group rather than being confusing and putting lots of different ones. There's our carboxyl group, and there. So, what happens when we need to make a protein? These amino acids are able to join by a condensation reaction. Now, if you've read any of my other stuff, then it's, you'll understand what that is already. If you haven't, just think of the word condensation. All that means is it's lost water. So you have the amino group of one amino acid here and the carboxyl group of another. What will happen is those there, they will leave. Now we've got 2 H's and an O. So that means it's lost as H2O. That's our water. And that makes it a condensation reaction. We are then left with carbon. Now carbon needs to make 4 bonds because of the amount of electrons. If you want to understand that, read the basic chemistry post. But essentially, carbons need to make 4 bonds. Nitrogen, on the other hand, make 3 covalent bonds. So by removing this H here, that's lost a bond, and removing this OH, this has lost a bond. So they subsidize that by bonding to each other. You then end up with something called a dipeptide, because you have 2 amino acids, being the di, joined by this new bond, which is a peptide bond. So, long story short, if you didn't understand chemistry and you don't want to, amino acids join and they lose a molecule of water. So that will continue and continue and continue until you end up with your protein. And that is the basics of it. And then we go into our 20 different. So you could have, glycine as one here, or proline, or alanine, or you could have glutamic acid, and that'll just continue all the way down, and you end up with your nice long protein chain that can be used to make muscle. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to check out the extra reading in the bottom, and well, yeah, that's protein basically. Pretty simple.